Namaste and good evening. On behalf of Center for ICT for Development at IMPRI Impact and Policy Research Institute, Prabhav Evam Niti Anusandhan Sansthan, Nai Delhi, I, Ritika Gupta, Assistant Director at IMPRI, welcome you to IMPRI #Web Policy Talk. Today, we are here for a distinguished lecture by Dr. Madhav Chavan on the topic, the state of education amidst the COVID-19 pandemic, impact, policy suggestions, and the way forward towards New India at 2047. I would now like to welcome our moderator for today, Dr. Simi Mehta, who is CEO and Editorial Director at IMPRI. Ma'am, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ritika. A very good evening to everyone, and I welcome you to today's distinguished lecture by Dr. Madhav Chavan. It is a privilege for us at IMPRI, Impact and Policy Research Institute, to be hosting this lecture. Along with Dr. Chavan, we have an eminent panel of discussants, whom I would be introducing subsequently. Never ever did we imagine that we would be living to witness and experience a pandemic of huge proportions and repercussions. And then the COVID-19 struck. It pushed the majority of the humankind indoors. Education at all levels, from pre-primary to tertiary, suffered a massive jolt. Students, teachers, educators, and administrators jostled for quickly finding alternate ways of teaching learning process. Fortunately, the Digital India push of the Government of India came as a boon. Internet and mobile data connectivity has been at its highest across the country, superseding the rural-urban divide. Yet, there have been several challenges like evidenced learning losses and dropouts, leading to a situation of education insecurity among the pupils. As a progressive nation, India cannot afford to remain complacent, even as we are gradually opening up our learning centers across the country in a phased manner. This is especially important as the resilience now would be instrumental in providing invaluable directions to the new India and the state in which we want our education to be when we celebrate the 100th year of India's independence in 2047. To discuss the shocks, aftershocks, policy changes, and the way forward, we are privileged to have amongst us Dr. Madhav Chavan, the relentless advocate of education for all. It is my honor to introduce him to you. Dr. Madhav Chavan was inspired by the National Literacy Mission that was launched by late Mr. Rajiv Gandhi, the then Prime Minister of India, and worked in the field of adult literacy in the early 1990s. In 1994, UNICEF in Mumbai put him in charge of creating a societal mission to universalize primary education in the city of Mumbai. As a result, he co-founded Pratham, which started in 1994-95 as a Mumbai-based organization and now has grown to be one of India's largest NGOs. Pratham works across the country with millions of children every year, focusing on basic learning outcomes, including reading and math. Its flagship programs like the Read India and the Annual Status of Education Report have earned Pratham a reputation as a pedagogy and advocacy innovator that has influenced policy and practice at the national and international level. He has stepped down as the CEO of Pratham Education Foundation, but still remains on its board and actively leads the new experimentation in use of technology and education. Dr. Chavan has been personally recognized for his work with the Wise Prize, the equivalent of the Nobel Prize in the field of education, and the Scholar Award for Social Entrepreneurship, among other honors. His organization, Pratham, has received several awards and recognitions like the Kravis Prize for Leadership, the BBVA Frontiers of Knowledge Award for Development Work, etc. Dr. Chavan was also a member of the National Advisory Council from 2004 to 2008, and also a member of the Governing Council of the Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan mission of the Government of India. Dr. Chavan holds a PhD in chemistry from the Ohio State University, my alma mater too. Thank you, sir, for accepting our invitation and joining us this evening. I humbly invite you to begin your lecture. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Simi, for inviting me.
Thank you, sir.
It's been now 10 months since we started this practice of webinars and Zoom calls and all that, but I still haven't gotten used to it. looking at a screen and giving a talk is quite different from sitting in a room across people and having a chat. I would have much preferred that, but it'll have to wait, I suppose. The topic that you've suggested today is something that I think many people are discussing. It's being talked about in international fora and so on. So this is, I guess, one more contribution to the ongoing discussions. I have prepared a note. I suspect, I don't know if some of you have received it. I tried to write down some points as to what I was thinking. So my first point to deal with the topic is impact, policy suggestions, and the way forward. So naturally, like in a school, you break up the topic and start talking about each point. When you talk about the impact of this pandemic, well, it's evident that schools have been closed down and they're gradually opening up now. But that is only saying what is happening. What is the actual impact of it? And as a result of that, what is going to happen is very difficult to say. My main point is that everybody is extrapolating their experience or whatever we think is going to happen. For example, we tend to think, and I'm not saying it's a wrong thinking, but it's the kind of thinking saying that look, there is the economy has slowed down, things have shut down, the economy is now opening up, which means that people's incomes have gone down, which means certain things must have happened or are going to happen, which means that school children are going to drop out and so on and so forth. So a lot of it is extrapolation of what we think is likely to happen, but there is no concrete evidence that this is happening. Uh, there is experience from different countries. For example, the work done in the United States on learning loss, about summer learning loss, when children go for a vacation and then come back, they know that a couple of months of learning is lost. There's been rigorous research on that. If you look at the current pandemic, some of the US researchers are saying there is no learning loss, and others are saying there is learning loss. And it's very difficult to understand who's right. But clearly, people are researching. But in India, we don't have such evidence. We have neither studied learning loss, nor do we know today what the likelihood of learning loss is. The assumption is that there will be learning loss since schools have been closed for 9 months and disrupted completely. And maybe some learning is happening with some sections of the society. But overall, with a loss of a whole academic year, there is going to be learning loss. But we don't know what we mean by learning loss. What is the definition of learning loss? I don't think we really know that. There are other things that we expect to happen. Now, in this regard, I mean, this is only about schools, and I'm going to primarily talk about school children or children up to the age of maybe 13, 14, and not higher than that. Although the bigger problems and more immediate and urgent problems may be for children or students who are reaching the end of stage. So reaching 10th standard or so who were in 10th standard in 1920, 21, for example, this must have been a terrible year for them, anxious, thinking what is going to happen to me, what is going to happen to my classes, what's going to happen to my exams. The administrators did not know what to do. Exam dates have been declared, but what kind of exam? If you didn't have a classroom studying and all that, then how is this going to happen? 12th standard, entrance examinations to various professional courses. So there has been a lot of difficulty that children have faced, students have faced, and we don't quite know what the impact of that is. It could be career disruption. Some people who are expecting to join a very competitive high-level course maybe just couldn't because of a variety of reasons. A friend of mine was telling me that her child was going to appear for an examination and was expecting to get high marks, but because of the way the examination was conducted, she was not prepared for it and did not score very well. So these kinds of disruptions have also happened, and that leads to frustration for a lot of young people. And what the cost and impact of that frustration is hard to say. And this has happened a lot in the higher age groups. And so naturally, people have been focusing their attention on the higher age groups. For example, online learning that Simi talked about, a lot of it was probably for the higher age groups, competitive examinations, stage end examinations, and so on, rather than at the younger stage. Now, I don't know how people would study that. People who are graduating, those who graduated in 2020, I'm still in 1920. So in 2020, those who graduated just when the schools were closing down at the time of the pandemic, and then looking forward to entering the job market, must have felt a terrible blow because there was no job market, there were no jobs. People were actually losing jobs as some people are aspiring to get their first job. So if all these things are put together, then it's a 1 year of quiet turmoil. Everybody's sitting at home, therefore it's quiet, but the unseen turmoil is happening everywhere. And the biggest problem, and if there is one policy suggestion that has to be made, it is really accelerate research on this. We don't have data, we don't have information which will lead to some conclusions. Right now, a lot of it is speculation. Good speculation, bad speculation, but it is speculation. For example, to say that I've seen reports that said private schools are shutting down and so on. Whether private schools should be there is a matter of debate as well. But especially affordable private schools have shut down because they don't have fees, teachers are not being paid. But that is a general economic stress. The question is, are they going to shut down for good? More than 35% children of this country were attending private schools, and a large majority of them were either middle level or lower income private schools. Now, do we expect all these schools to shut down? In which case, all the children who go to these private schools or went to these private schools in 2019 20, will they transfer to government schools? That would be a disastrous scenario. Disastrous not because they all go to government schools, but because there'll be overcrowding and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of scope to imagine all that. Now, in all this, our ASAR Center, you are probably aware that we do annual status of education report, and it is conducted by a dedicated center affiliated to Pratham called the ASAR Center. And we ventured out and did a on calls or phone survey with a sample that we had, a nationwide sample based on the database that we had in the previous year. And we made phone calls to families. I won't go through the stages. If you go to the website asarcenter.org, you will find all the data and the report and all that. And we tried to find out what was going on. And to cut the story short, what we have found so far is that it's hard to conclude. Because if the schools are not open yet, how do you tell whether the child is not in school or not? You ask a parent, is your child going to school? Clearly, the child is not going to school. But has your child dropped out of school? Well, the school is not open, so how do I know? What is the definition of a dropout? If I were to look at attendance of a school, which was 100%, let's say, or 70, 80%, 90%. India total attendance, average attendance is 90%. If there was a 90% attendance before the pandemic and there is 75% attendance after the pandemic, then I know that 15% children are missing or something of that sort has happened. But that number doesn't exist. But when we ask the parents, is your child going to school? Is your child in school yet? We found that for the older age group, especially after the age of 8 or 9, we did not see any uh, great difference in enrollment. And remember, we did a phone survey, true, but 90% of the population has phones. So it's not as though we are only taking privileged classes. That's not true. So we did not see any evidence of children dropping out or parents saying my child is going to leave school, mere paas abhi paise nahi hai. That did not happen. We did not see that. Does that mean that children and girls are not going to drop out? That is difficult to say because the economic consequences of the pandemic have not unfolded fully yet. So my point is there learning loss? There's no evidence. We could not test whether there's learning loss or not. We have been testing children to find out whether, especially, and we suspect that learning loss will happen among the weaker children. Let's say reading ability of a child. If the child was not able to read fluently in the first place, the likelihood of slide down, slide back is much greater than a child who was fluent in reading in the first place. Okay. So if you were to see, has there been a slide back? We have been testing on a very large scale in our own projects. And it doesn't appear that there is a huge difference as yet. I'm being very cautious here. We don't have definitive data yet, but we don't see that as yet. So if you were to define learning loss, how would you define learning loss? Is learning loss forgetting knowledge, forgetting skills? What is it? And we don't have a proper definition of this learning loss in India, is my fear. And without that, just talk about learning loss will be difficult. But here's the thing. It is clear, and I know this from my childhood, that when I went on a vacation, my mother was a teacher, and she used to tell me, vacation work diya hai, isko karo. And I used to resist it. And it was a terrible fight with my mother every day almost. And when I went back to school, of course, I did not remember everything. Of course, I did not know. And that's anecdotal purely. So there is some loss, but that recovery of that loss is very quick. It's not that I've lost it forever. I may forget to do certain things, but that doesn't mean I've forgotten it forever. But as long as there's a recovery process, there's no problem. And I think this is borne out elsewhere also, that if there is a learning loss, you can recover it by taking remedial action. So the point I would like to make, and the big point, which will lead into the suggestions to come, is that let us not, because there is no evidence, let's not assume that this is not going to happen. Let's not assume that girls are going to drop out. Let's not assume that boys are not going to drop out. Let's not assume that there is going to be a stress in the education system for the younger children. Let us assume that all these things are going to happen and take some steps. So one of the biggest and the most important critical steps that we are suggesting, and the new education policy has said that India is going through a learning crisis, and that this is accepted globally now. World Bank came out with this report talking about learning crisis and so on. This is something that ASAR has been saying, that children reach fifth standard, only 50% know how to read a second standard paragraph. So that crisis has been there. And if anything, this will only get worse. So why not use this opportunity to start a catch-up program, nationwide catch-up program for 3 months? Don't wait for the schools to reopen in June and July. Primary schools, I'm afraid, are going to open only in June and July, not right now. But if you start today and start a catch-up program for 3 months for all children, then nothing is lost, and you can do it at home also. It's very simple. There's one observation that we have from our ASAR survey that we did on the phone, and that is 80% of the population said they have the school textbooks, the current school textbooks. It seems that the school system teachers have gone door to door or have taken stocks of textbooks to the school, and they've been reached. 60% or 75% of the parents have said they are helping their children. May not be daily, children may not be listening, but it seems like there was some learning going on, and this is not your online learning. This has very little to do with digital, okay? Because again, I don't remember the exact numbers, but not more than about 30% population got anything on digitally. And we are talking about rural populations, the more deprived populations. We are not talking about the urban middle classes and higher. So not more than 30% got anything on, say, WhatsApp messages and so on. They did, but not everyone. So what has helped is what was already established. Textbooks were there. What did they get knowledge out of textbooks? I don't imagine that. But having a textbook and attempting to read it must engage the child in some way. And that may have helped. So if there's no learning loss, a big learning loss, I would not be surprised. But I'm saying, let's assume that there is going to be all this and start taking corrective action. You need community mobilization. You need parents to feel that something right is going to happen. Another factor that is not discussed in the media is, and this is something that I inquired in our network, and what seems to have happened is that the school system has distributed food grains. Now imagine you are bottom of the pyramid, no income, and grain comes to your child every month or every week or whatever, that's a big relief. It's a big psychological relief that somebody is looking after me, something is happening. Cooking costs have been transferred apparently to bank accounts. I don't have exact solid proof of this, but this has been done on a large scale. Now, which means that the school system has performed a very big task during this. And so it's possible that we are not so badly off. We can do better, and we should do much better. So the biggest and the simplest suggestion I will make, without getting into too many things, is organize village to village, community to community catch up programs which say, okay, this is over and let's get back into school now and let's start learning. So if this happens, then you have the opportunity to start something big and something good to overcome the crisis that we started out with in the first place. So this is something that I suspect is possible. I don't want to get into too many policy suggestions. You can always write so many policy suggestions. Paise de do, ye karo, wo karo. But main thing is overcome the crisis that was there before and which is likely to have been exacerbated by this pandemic. That is the one. The real thing that I would like to talk, and that's my favorite subject, is what to do afterwards. And you have put the date 2047. What happens next? I must tell you a little secret. Well, it's not a big secret. 6-7 years ago, I started thinking that we've been talking about children not learning in schools for ages now, and nothing changes. Why is that? Quality of education, we talk about everything. Their policy for papers are written, consultants are appointed, all kinds of things happen. But somehow quality of education doesn't improve. What is the problem? Are we not doing right? Government is not doing right. The British are to be blamed. What is going on? And then it started dawning on me, or at least I started thinking that, we thought that school was the solution to the problems of education. But now many people have said that the school kills creativity, it kills the problems of education and learning and all that. So what if school was the problem of education? School is the problem. School is not the solution. Suppose if that is the case, then what? Now, Pratham's motto or tagline is every child in school and learning well. And so I started toying with this idea and I started talking to my colleagues. What if we were to change the tagline to every child not in school and learning well? And I got a huge pushback. A lot of young people started screaming at me, what do you mean? You can't say this. Children are going to school for the first time, first generation, and you are now saying schools, they should not be schools. And look what happened. They say, you should be very careful what you wish for, it might come true. And so all schools closed down and children were at home. There was no school. The four walls of the school was not there. The teacher was not with the children. The textbooks were at home, but the school was completely destroyed for 1 year. And we had to rebuild it supposedly. Now the question is what is the kind of education that is possible? The one thing that has happened, although as I said, digital, the proportion of children that got digitally some learning material was not very, very high. It's some very 33% or something. And they did get 33% also is very high. But it's not as though everybody got it. But one thing that has happened is in the pandemic, top to bottom, people have gotten used to the idea of technology. People know how to access things and so on. Proportion of people who have smartphones jumped between 2018 and 2020 from say something like 36% to 60% or so. So it's a huge population jump which has access to smartphone and internet and so on. That is true. We don't know that those smartphones are useful for education. It's good for watching YouTube perhaps, but is it good for education? That's a tough one. So suddenly there is excitement, excuse me, there is excitement that technology is going to be useful in education. Yes, but how? Somehow people have these visions of children sitting in front of a computer and learning. Uh, Somebody has to do a sociological and educational, two separate studies of what happened during online education. With children loved it, liked it, hated it. What did they do? And I keep hearing many different stories from children who've gone through so-called online learning, and there is a very small percentage of children who went through online learning. I think the total population in India that has computers, laptops or desktops at home is not more than 11 or 12%. That's the number I get. Most people who are connected to the internet are connected through mobile phones. Okay. So is that useful for learning? But it is useful for something else. It is not something that you can use only for a two-way communication. It's very difficult to do a two-way communication for a large number of people in the current context. If you have a class of 40 students, one teacher dealing with 40 students sitting with smartphones is a very difficult proposition. But the use of technology in education is going to be possible. Yes. But the question is, what kind of education? And that is the bigger question that we should ask. The main thing that technology does, and which is a big bold point I would like you to note on my behalf, is that this technology is a non-linear pathway. This technology creates a non-linear pathway. Very simple. If you are going through the current education system, you have to study something in standard 1, then 2, then 3, then 4 and 5 and 6 and 7 and 8. So unless you studied your standard 4, you can't go to standard 7. That's impossible. But if you are learning on the internet or a simple computer, a loaded computer with all kinds of things, you don't know where you will end up. You may suddenly start exploring black holes. Now, will you be able to learn anything about black holes? Maybe not, but depends. If I say that, look, I don't care whether a 10-year-old wants to learn about black holes, then I may have to write something about black holes so that a 10-year-old can understand. And you can write things about black holes in not more than 4 or 5 lines. It depends. I mean, you can write big, huge volumes, but you can write 4 or 5 lines and the guy can say, yeah, I know, I understand what you're talking about. It's like having the difference between operating a TV and understanding how a TV is built or how a TV is made. I don't need to know how a TV is made, but I can use a TV. So I think on the learning side, this big difference is that the technology gives you the ability to navigate learning non-linearly. Learn anything, anywhere, anytime, almost anyhow. And what is missing is the assessment part of it. See, I remember when I went to college, it was frustrating that we had to use log tables and even later. I mean, when I was in college, there was no calculator. But even later on, kids were not. I suspect even today, people are not used to allowed to use calculators. Now, in real life, 337 multiplied by 456. What is the answer? Unless you are a Shakuntala Devi, you can't get that answer. Then you have to sit down and start jotting. But otherwise, you'll take a calculator, and more likely people will do an Excel and find out the answer. If you understand how multiplication is to be done, that's one thing. But why not use calculators? Why not use computers? Why not use open book? We are still stuck with the same old system. So my thinking is we have to start pivoting. If technology is important, if we are going to use technology, use the strength of technology. All education technology today, the applications are all geared to the linear textbooks. अगर आपके पास जो सॉफ्टवेयर बनाया is it according to the textbook, then I will use it. Then the schools will, and even the for-profit edtech providers go entirely by the textbook. And you completely forget that the technology is capable of delivering so much more. And we've not done that. I think the change of the technology mindset has happened everywhere else, but not in education. And it is important that we do that. I believe now. So, for example, I have been saying for quite some time now, and it's a very evident truth. It's like the what is that story? Emperor without clothes or emperor's clothes, right? So everybody knew that the fellow was stark naked and parading around, but it took a child to get up and say, "Isko to nanga hai ye to." So until then, everybody was saying, "Wow, wow, kitne kapde achhe hain." So actually, it's like that. You know that these certificates and all that are not useful for jobs. I mean, from every angle you see, they are not useful for jobs. You ask recruiters, you ask employers, how seriously do you look at your degrees? Nobody. Google का तो पूरा process बन गया है कि you don't need to have a degree. To get a programmer's job in Google, you don't need to have a computer science degree. What more do you want? So it's not that, of course, in some cases you may need, because that length of training and all that, the rigor is required. But for most people, you don't. In the Indian economy, not more than 9-10% population has salaried jobs. Everybody else is self-employed or in agriculture or something or the other. When you're self-employed, nobody asks whether you are a BA or BTech. Nobody wants to know. Can you deliver? So the whole system has gone completely different, and we are still stuck with telling children, अच्छा पढ़ो तो आपको नौकरी मिलेगी. किसी को नौकरी नहीं मिलने वाली. And this has nothing to do with the type of government you have. The economy has changed completely. So the way we learn, the way we teach our children has to change. It is already changing. That's what I say. The good news is it's already changing. The kids know it, the parents don't, and the teachers pretend we don't know. The education system thinks हमारा university बहुत अच्छा है, and we know everything, but the kids know better, and they're telling us कि ये पढ़ाई वढ़ाई बंद कर दो, अब इससे कुछ नहीं होने वाला, हमारा भला नहीं होने वाला. I think you have to take that seriously, and we have to develop a different kind of a learning system. The old education system, I was talking to Nandan Nilekani about this once, and he came up with a very simple answer. He said, yeah, in the industrial revolution period, we created institutions, the institutions created walls. And now it's time to have institutions without walls. Exactly. But all these walls are necessary. Why? If you don't, you appear for an entrance exam, then I will let you into the IIT. But the secret is, IIT में जो पढ़ना है मैं बाहर से ही पढ़ सकता हूँ. Why do I have to go to IIT for that? The whole institutional angle is changing. Do I need to go inside a school to learn? अभी तो pandemic ने बता दिया कि तुम घर पे बैठ के भी पढ़ सकते हो. So these lessons have to be taken into account and then understand. I'll end by saying that in the Pratham story, one of the things we've started doing 4 years ago, and it's coming in handy now, is we have started looking at a different kind of a curriculum. Earlier, we were doing only reading, writing, arithmetic. But now we are looking at a curriculum that is threefold. One is learning for school. You need to learn for school. I'm not telling kids or parents कि बच्चों को स्कूल में से हटा दो. It's not possible to do that. और मेरी पिटाई होगी. So that is not okay, right? So that's not. But and being among your peers, and when the teacher says ये डफर है, इसको कुछ नहीं आता है, तुमको तुम्हारा कभी भला नहीं होगा, that is no good. So the child really needs to say कि भाई, hold your horses. I know something. I'm not that bad. Rank नहीं आता होगा मेरा, लेकिन I understand what you're talking about. I don't flunk. I understand. So that is necessary. That is learning for school and school subjects. That's a certain thing that you need to learn. Second is learning for life. We don't tell teacher. This is an important period in the new era where children have to learn early to take care of themselves. They're losing their childhood. They don't know how to deal with their adolescence. The things that we are throwing at the children, the life that they are facing, they don't know how to face. And that is something that is important. Iski jankari, the knowledge of this is everywhere. There are people in gullies and mohallas who can actually tell you wisdom. Wisdom is important. Learning for life, that is important. You need to understand your health. You need to understand how you think. You need to understand your brain. But this is not connected with the textbook learning that we have. So learning for life. And the third part is learning for work. You are not going to get your jobs. अभी तो और भी difficult होगा. As the economy unfolds, we'll say V-shaped होगा, जो भी होगा. I think we are going to have a lot of problems still. And the young people have to start figuring out how they're going to work. What is the meaning of work and livelihood? Or all this, if we don't put into our learning system, I don't care whether the schools do it or not, colleges do it or not, but for the sake, if we imagine ourselves as parents and grandparents, then we need to come up with systems so that children, young children and youth learn how to deal with life and work. I've spoken for about 30 minutes. I thought semi, I said 15 minutes में मैं खत्म कर दूंगा, लेकिन बोलना शुरू कर दिया तो रुकता नहीं हूँ. I'm sorry about this.
No problem at all.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank
Okay.
you.
All right.
Thank you so much, sir. I mean, we just wanted you to go on and on. Such a thoroughly
Don't invite me. I just might take you up on that.
Sir, sir, well, let us thank you so much. It was really informative and interesting and thoroughly engrossing lecture. Let me now turn to our discussants. I would request our eminent discussants to take around 5 to 7 minutes of their time and kindly reflect on Dr. Chavan's lecture and also delve a little bit on the new education policy that has been rolled out and the budgetary allocation to education, if you may. And what are your thoughts on these based on your areas of expertise? I know you work on action-based and higher education, primary education, etc. So on this question, if I can begin with Ms. Huma Masood. She is the National Program Officer, Gender and Education at UNESCO in New Delhi. Over to you, ma'am.
Thanks a lot. After such a enlightening and enriching discussion and inputs provided by Sir, he has kind of touched upon very many things. So I would start with something, quite a few things I have in my head now, which concern this whole thing of SEDG, I mean, what we call socioeconomically disadvantaged groups. So since we were talking a lot about schools, recently we had this International Day of Education, and we kind of deliberated upon many of these things. And what we realized during this discussion was that in India, there are almost 1.5 million schools. And out of this, there are 25,000 schools which actually, in principle conducted online classes. I mean, on record, because these are CBSE and ICSE schools. So since, if we look at this whole thing of digital infrastructure, and of course, we also heard that, there are students and children who were using smartphones and not just limited to laptops, but almost like 90% of them, these children, like the type of learning programs we were seeing and the activities which were conducted, almost 35 million children are under this group of SEDGs, and there weren't many standalone programs for them. So their learning, of course, must have been impacted, along with this, you also mentioned about children and the education system looked after the grains and the healthcare programs or whatever were provided. But we still feel there has been some amount of disconnect. Then you also spoke about work education and its importance, and therefore we feel that there has been a disconnect also, from school to work transition, if we talk about. So again, this whole thing of skills and education, there has been, shortage of skill education programs which were not conducted because most of the learning was on literacy and, numeracy and reading, writing. And also there have been, we observed in this discussion that there are a lot of gaps, and therefore, these aspects have to be looked at because, where would employability be and how productive, their future would be. Then there's also this discussion about, and you mentioned also about the early childhood, the foundational learning part, there has been a learning crisis, and we know we cannot measure it. We really do not know, as you mentioned. But when we are talking about this whole continuity of education and lifelong learning, which UNESCO also promotes and believes. What about the early childhood care and education? There has been, like, this the 3 to 6 age group, has been impacted. And we know that there have been, like, a lot of projects and programs which were there, but we feel that, this, like, for example, play-based mechanisms and also where's that. Then there have been significant efforts. We know of digital content and lessons. There's been crisis because 50 to 60% children had this issue of, the availability of resources, modalities, connection, and so therefore this whole continuity to learning is something which did not reach the unreached groups, and hard to measure, but yet it requires multiple strategies. As you said, catch up is one way, but we need different pathways, and there could not be a single mechanism. I also heard about this whole thing of the expenditure on education, which is I mean, we know that it's still inadequate, and this would have, like, there are fears that this crisis can widen the gap, because the government budgets are generally declining. There's fiscal constraints, and of course, in this present scenario, there has been impacts on the household earnings, and therefore this whole thing of cut in wages, unemployment, would have impact on education, first, because um, the first target is basically, when crisis happens, is on the education. This pandemic, has thrown this, I mean, it's facing us, and we need to find ways, and the first sector we know, which is generally sacrificed, is education. For example, the COVID schools were closed, this as the first measure to face this problem. And also, they will be the last to be reopened. So this will lead to a significant decline again, to the education budget. We know that the private sector, which is also investing in education recently, will perhaps not do much, before, and there could be one or just a few things which maybe the private sector may like to invest on, maybe on the digital modes of learning, and in those areas. But there is also the soft part, which has to be looked at. Mm, and we know that although there's no data on it, but there'll be significant dropout, on and this is going to be a huge problem. Yes, there are alternative calendars which were operated. There's the digital platforms like Swayamprabha, Diksha, ePachala. And I mean, one can say that, the government has been conscious and has been, kind of trying its best. But there is also one more area, which I would like to stress upon. And that is during the pandemic, what we say is that the the virus has harmed the body, and but it has also created a kind of a discriminatory environment, in the system. And so, well, there's a vaccine, we say, and vaccine has come, and it will protect us against this disease. But then we need, the right kind of education, because we know that certain prejudices have come in front. There is this whole element of, some kind of prejudices, and people who have, access, and people who do not have access. And, so this has created a different kind of environment. I mean, also, which needs, some kind of attention at least. And we need to think about it, because this disruption, what we say is, we are looking at normal schooling, normal setups. But, this is something which we need to look at, that how we are going to be addressing on mm, these aspects, because this is going beyond the classrooms. And so we need some kind of interventions on this also. And I hope, like, our group will discuss on this, aspect also. There is this whole thing of environmental awareness also, which we need to look at, and see how we can make our systems more conscious, because this cannot be exempted. We have to also look at this very clearly. Another aspect, of course, is children with disabilities, and the vulnerable groups have been also impacted, and we have to see, we have to go beyond, like, romanticizing, what we call, this whole system, this whole notion of citizenship and all. We need to really see how responsibly we can, and our teachers and education system and our policymakers, would reflect upon these kind of issues, and, see that the pedagogical dimensions, will be more civic, now, because the new normal did not actually address the issues of children with disabilities or the migrant population and the groups. And there has been a huge amount of, there are issues of child abuse, domestic violence, and so these have also impacted, the children, who were in the four walls, So yet you mentioned, sir, that the books were sent to the homes, and there was this whole program wherein the teachers were in touch with the parents and the children. But there has been some amount of discrimination of very different forms. There have been hate speeches. There have been issues of economic polarization. So we need to also look at these aspects when we are talking about the new normal, the new normal, as we say, is basically more to do with stock markets and world trade and, job markets. And but, this the COVID-19 is impacting, the lives and the social order also, So, and there are presently multiple kinds of crises, which have to be addressed, also along with when we are dealing with, creating digital platforms. And so there are very many, questions which we have to
Ma'am,
look at.
sorry to interrupt. Maybe we'll come back to you in the
Okay.
second round,
Yeah.
and we'll
Okay.
take the conversation. Thank you so much for
Sure.
your initial remarks. So I would now request Dr. Swati Jha, who is the Program Director for the Learning and Migration Program, LAMP program, from the American India Foundation. Dr. Swati, over to you. 5 to 7 minutes for you.
Sure. Thank you, Simi. And sir, it was really a pleasure listening to you. And when you said that,
Dr. Swati, sorry to interrupt. Your voice is breaking a bit. Could you check, or you could turn off your video if the bandwidth is low? It was really
Sure, I'll just do that. I think that's some issue with the, so thank you. So I think, some of the points that you raised, and particularly that looking into and measuring learning loss and how it has impacted continuity, but at the same time, there were many pertinent aspects raised by Huma also. What we see, when a lockdown happened, it was very sudden, and children were just at the point of transiting from one academic year to the another academic year. The whole confusion happened, and there was nothing in place to address these issues. So it clearly highlights that there's a complete lack of education in emergency plan within the whole system. And if you look at when pandemic started until now, it's nearly 10 to 11 months. I mean, we'll be completing 1 year now in February and March. So this was enough time for schools, education system to think through and come up with the plan how to reach out to children. But yes, by the time everything started, it was already May and June when textbooks were given to them. However, going back to our own experience of working with children, and like you said, community mobilization. So most of the non-profits with their particularly in the sense that where we work in remote areas where children belong to families of seasonal migrants. So these children were staying in seasonal hostels, which were shut down, and children were handed over to, not to parents, because parents were away. They were stuck at work sites. So either to guardians or to, and many children prefer to stay alone. So what we call child-headed households. Yes, government did provide them meals and all, and in some cases, money was given to them in their account, but looking at the economic stress, that money was utilized. However, when we look at interventions, one of the very encouraging things which came up was youth volunteerism. I think they were the people who really helped not only school teachers, but also connecting them with children and parents. And this is something which new education policy also envisages in terms of, remedial instructional aids who can be from the community. And the continuity of education happened because these people took learning resources, storybooks and all, what we also call mobile libraries, because it's not mobile library in a van or all, but it was these volunteers on a bicycle or a motorbike covering village to village, taking these books. So these examples are there, which you also said that every village needs to come up with a catch-up program. And yes, so these experiences we are in the process of accumulating. We also started a 45 days program for children so that they can catch up to lots of money. I completely agree with Huma when she said that textbooks were there, but what was the extent of them learning those textbooks? It was not there because most of the time what we observed, they were either working with the parents in Manreka or fields, agricultural fields, or fetching wood from forest. And in urban areas, suddenly profile of these people who were delivering goods changed. They became more and more younger. And when asked, don't you have your online classes? They said, "Hamari class raat ko aati hai." So the homework which comes through WhatsApp, that is what they do at the end of the day, and then they pass it on. So if this is what meant by moving on to digital platform, I think this is a misnomer, and it has to be put in a very, the whole thing has to be put in a very structured way. And you're very right, there's a whole lot of, a deluge of edtech which is there, which is completely aligned with the curriculum. And there's no scope for creativity. It is like digitization of textbooks. But schools are spaces where socialization happens, where when you say learning for school, that school readiness happens. All these aspects are really very well envisaged in new education policy. And I think one of the key things if we look at is having this extension of Right to Education Act from age of 3 to 18 years of age, extending it to secondary school as well. It is, if this happens, then it is going to be one of the very revolutionary steps within India, because why people are migrating, because they have this lack of skills, negotiation skills, or skills to work. And if these skills are imparted within school system or within a place where either they find opportunities at their own source geographies or destination. Yesterday there was this news in Hindustan Times which said that 166,000 children are untraceable. They have fallen off the grid in Delhi itself. And so how do we track these children? And it's just one state, Delhi, where they have been able to track. But what about such children across India? So when we are talking about one ration card, one nation, one ration card, is it possible to have one tracking system for all children so that accountability is maintained? And I think there are some very good takeaways also from what you suggested, Dr. Chavan, that learning for schools, learning for work, and learning for life. Yes, I think these are some of the ways, if we look at it in a very structured manner, definitely children will benefit from it rather than taking it across, just floating it through education system. And technology, yes, but how do we get each school connected with technology? This is one of the biggest challenges. All governments immediately after when pandemic happened, they launched digital learning. But states like Chhattisgarh, which had only 30% mobile penetration, and before starting, we also did a survey. So 10% had smartphones, 15 to 20% had feature phones. But so that way we realized that a large percentage of children with whom we were working, they just fell off the grid. I mean, the whole network. Then looking for them individually took a lot of time. So, so these are certain questions which we all need to look into as to how we reform our education and how new education policy, which actually looks at integrating from childhood to life, or, a complete life cycle approach, be beneficial for children, particularly in rural geographies. So this is what I would like to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Swati. So I now go to Ms. Chitra Jayanti. She is the Executive Director at Janya Foundation in Hyderabad. Ma'am, over to you.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Madhav. That was very inspiring, and Huma and the other panelists. I'll restrict my discussion to secondary education from grade 6 to 10, and would like to specify that, yes, we had issues with learning gaps. As Madhav said, we are not very sure to what extent. But we've had some experiences which I would like to share. We started off like all other government initiatives online initially, and we failed quite miserably on that aspect. Out of the 10,000 children that we enrolled for online sessions, we ended up getting effectively 223. We did a survey of 834 children, door-to-door survey, fundamentally asking them, what are the issues, more or less what all of you have discussed regarding internet and not access to smartphones, etc., specifically to learning. What we have observed when the schools reopened in Telangana and Andhra Pradesh, children are back fairly in large numbers in government schools. And there is a kind of, I wouldn't say a gap, but a blankness among children. I wouldn't like to use a sense of lethargy, but a sense of being unaware of what is in store for them by coming to school, which really made the teachers and us wonder, what is it we need to do to excite them and bring them back to some kind of a learning environment. So we have a program in Janya called the Janya Lab in a Box. We pulled out all the experiments that we have complementing the curriculum and started with the teachers online and in school with small group sessions with children, fundamentally ensuring that there is a catch-up program happening before the schools reopen, which really led us think that exactly what Madhav was mentioning. How do we make this catch-up program exciting for the children, especially the older ones we are dealing with? So this has helped us understand science and mathematics. If experiments were used and an environment is used to teach, we managed to get a fairly large number of children into the program and into the schools. We used the nature labs to teach children topics in science and mathematics, which covered 30% of the curriculum. Now, these experiments were complementing the curriculum, and it was the school which did not have any lesson plan, did not have any specific agenda how to go about it, enabled us to take the lead and help the teachers to come out with some curriculums that they are going to think it will be useful for the children. And we started off with grade 9 and 10 kids with grade 4 and 5 topics, and gradually introduced grade 6, 8, 9, 10, which are common, whether it's in terms of area, perimeter, fractions, percentages, profit and loss, etc. So it's a slow process. It's been happening. Mother, I would like to draw your attention is we did not succeed in a homeschool program. Being an urban area in Hyderabad, fundamentally, we lost a lot of children because being probably migrant kids in Hyderabad, they've moved out of Hyderabad. So we lost children not knowing where they are. Most of them have moved to their rural or communities that they belong to. So only very few, selective few managed to come back to school, which probably is about 40%, which I think is a fairly good number to start with. So it's a slow process, but I think it is a loss of learning, but not too bad. Again, we have done no assessment, we have done no baselines to say, has it made an impact or a difference? But there is a lot of excitement. Children are excited to come back to school and learn. Thank you.
Thank you, Chitra ma'am. It was very nice to listen to you. Now, finally, I invite Professor Swamin Chatopadhyay, who is professor at Zakir Husain Center for Educational Studies at the School of Social Sciences, Jawaharlal Nehru University. So, over to you.
Yeah, so thanks, Simi. It has been really a pleasurable experience for me to listen to Madhavji, and I doubt whether have the wealth of experience and exposure adequate enough to reflect on what he has said. But some of the suggestions that he has made, or the way he has envisaged the future, entail a brainstorming session. But anyway, given the time constraint and my competence, I would restrict myself to make a few observations. The first is about the learning loss. learning loss, I fully agree with him, it can be remedied. And though there is no evidence, it depends on when the evidence is collected. Because it can be remedied, if you do the survey now, possibly there would be some learning loss, but over a period of time, it can be perfectly remedied. So I fully agree with him. But this learning, as we are wriggling out of this pandemic and embracing a future, what is important for us to remember that some structural changes will remain embedded into the system. And what are those structural changes? The reality of India is a very complex and complicated. It's a intersection between rural, urban, public, and private schooling. Both are heterogeneous. And then you have got the gender, then you have got the social categories. So the landscape is very, very complicated with these intersections. And it is here the future has to be envisaged in a realistic manner. So the first point is about the structural changes in the economy. Now, the informal sector is most likely to overcome the disruption, right? So in the informal sector, as Madhavji also indicated, in the sense that 80% or 85% are employed in the informal sector. And because of this irreparable loss in the informal sector, the vulnerable section will be at a very difficult situation. So my point is that, okay, as we are embracing the future or envisaging the future, and we need to embrace, whether the level playing field, how it has been dented and how the state, the parents, the public and the private schooling are going to address to restore or to ensure that the level playing field exists. And this point is very, very important. Secondly, about the digital technology, as I was listening to him, the school functioning may get digitized to a large extent. If the school functioning, the teacher attendance and the teachers taking the class are digitized, possibly we will not have online classes by 2022. There will be an accountability which will get institutionalized in the system. The teachers will come prepared for the class. And being a teacher, I feel that I am become more accountable to the system now because I come prepared for the class. I'm very punctual, and all of us take the classes because of the accountability system is very, very strong. It's not that we used to shirk our responsibilities, but it's what I'm saying that the digital technology can have a very important role in improving the functioning of the school. The second point, about being in the school or whether the schools are really the problem, what Madhavji was mentioning, I was trying to remember what Amartya Sen said, that learning is only one of the 5 objectives of going to the school. The other objectives are, one of them is the social, you get to know the peer, the socialization in a school, in an Indian context is very important because it's extremely diverse country. So being in the classroom, which can have an impact on the child labor and given the opportunity cost of the little children going to the school, being in the school by itself is very, very important. My third observation would pertain to the non-linear and linear, that the point that he was mentioning is perfectly fine. But my issue is that non-linear will again create a very unequal system. It has to be formalized, but can it be so easily formalized, the non-linear learning? Those who are really the fast learners with a lot of family support, a lot of social and family capital will gain from non-linear learning. And again, what we are talking about is the level playing field and the learning outcome for all, because the school education provides a foundation of the pyramid. So non-linear is fine, but I believe that some of us would go ahead and the most of us would tend to lag behind. And this is the problem. So, I appreciate your the future, but there will remain a problem. Regarding the public-private divide, I think we have to talk about the low-cost private schooling. When you're talking about the responses, the public school and the private school, both are heterogeneous. Now, the state is unlikely to pump in more resources in the future. How the private is going to respond to this, what you are saying about community engagement and catch-up activities, particularly the low-cost private school. And the elite school can do, the government school can do, but this problem when the informal sector is disrupted and people have lost jobs, and school being embedded into the family, into the larger social context, will also feel that kind of disruption the family is facing, and the family will also feel the disruption the economy is facing, right? There will be some structural changes. The next point is about, I will not take much time. It's about the learning for job and the learning for work. In fact, I was remembering the 2004 OECD paper authored by Stephen Vincent Lacrine, where one of the future scenario of the university would be lifelong learning and open education, right? Admission would be free, open access, and we, the teachers, would be much more demand-oriented and would be learner-oriented system. And what the kind of situation that he was trying to portray, Madhavji, I mean, it's already envisaged in 2004 article, and then many people have talked about it. It's more like online learning because the demand for skill or technology is rapidly changing. And we need to cope up. We need to impart that kind of right kind of training to the school going children so that they can actually do this. Other than what we are talking about, the skill, one important aspect when I look at the disorder or order, pardon me for saying this, in the social and political realm, I think that critical thinking is very, very important. And to what extent the critical thinking can be developed, can be inculcated among the children in an online system, it's actually it's an important issue for me. So the future of learning and the lifelong learning and open education is well taken, but again, the socialization aspect and the self-formation, it's not about learning only, it's the self-formation, trying to develop that kind of sensitivity, empathy, and compassion for the larger society is of absolute importance today. So this is what I would like to tell you. These are my observations. And I'd like to end here. I'd like to listen to Madhavji about his reflection and other panelists. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Professor Saumen. Yes, thank you very much to all the discussant panelists. Sir, Dr. Chavan, going to you, there are a couple of questions and also mostly reflections on your lecture. So I would like to pose them to you, and you could respond to the comments that have been made by our discussants as well. So in fact, one of the persons is actually one of the recipients of Mr. Adit, who is mentioning that children are ignoring education. In his house, kids are waking up right on time, and then they're leaving the mobile phone in one corner, and then they are just moving around. They have actually distanced themselves from education, and when situation would become normal, they would perhaps refrain from going to school. Because the work is being done and they are doing the work. And it has also led to putting down the competition they used to face during school, physically when they used to go. And this was similarly raised by Professor Saumen as well. Another question that has come up, I'm posing them because I know we are around time. So, you mentioned about learning for life and learning for jobs, which is actually the need of the hour. So how could we make them understand, how do we make this understood to the children themselves? And also on NEP, new education policy, the co-curricular activities are being included in the mainstream syllabus. Do you think it is a good step, and admissions in higher education institutions on basis of art and other activities, which is very uncommon today? So if you could reflect on those. So I know you could choose to respond. A lot of questions. Sir, over to you.
No, so I'll pick on these 3 points. There's not enough time, as I told you.
Yes, sir.
In this time, 6:30, I have another Zoom to attend to. So I have to just get out here at 6:30. So thank you, Dr. Chattopadhyay, for bringing that point about the value of a school where students, children get together. It has more things to offer than just education. I'm not going to use the word learning, because learning happens in everything. When we play, we learn, we fight, we learn all kinds of things. So yes, I agree with that. In fact, I have always maintained for the last several years now that the school is the best daycare system that we could invent. So it may not be serving the purpose of education for a lot of children, but it does serve a very critical function of protecting children, which was not, the protective mechanism wasn't there. Now it is there. Children are even getting their midday meals and nutrition and all that. So it's a very important one. In this day, time and age when both parents are out working, there's nobody looking, and these family splitting up into nuclear families, etc., etc. The family structure has changed, and so the school becomes critical as a place that offers protection and social interaction. So that is really definitely important. But if we go to the other 2 points that Simi you mentioned, two questions that have come up. So the whole idea is that the school as a structure. So if we take the functions that the school offers and what we need for the children, we need a place for children to get together, to play, to socialize, to learn these negotiating skills, to learn all kinds of things that are not only in the textbook. Then how are we going to do that? Is it only in one structure, or can it be done differently? We have been running some programs in which children by themselves start doing things. We gave tablets in children's hands. And let me assure you that I'm not a fan of online learning. That's not what I am. What I'm saying is the technology can be useful. So for example, if you put a computer and then a teacher is teaching you online, that's a completely different thing. I'm not a fan of that. Okay. Never was a fan of teacher teaching me. I'd rather learn by myself. But what we did, and we're doing it in now a couple of thousand villages, children get tablets and they're free to do what they want. And what we found was, interestingly, children create their own resources. I thought we will give them something to learn, but the first thing that happened was children started making videos and showing us. They started learning how to make videos. So creation of knowledge that we were talking about is something that is useful. They were not the best of videos in the beginning, but later on they started learning those skills. So actually giving technology in the hands of the children is making education child-centric. That's what the process of learning, that's how it is made exciting. If the process of learning is not exciting, then nobody's children will want to go to school. Okay, if there is, then what is it there in the school that is attractive for the children? It could be the storytelling of the teacher, it could be the friends, it could be all kind of, it could even be what you get in the canteen. You never know. So the children will find the learning process exciting, and it has to be child-centric, child-led even in many cases. And unfortunately, today the learning process or education process is neither child-centric nor child-led, and it becomes completely boring. Although you can say that textbooks are getting better, they look better, and so on. So that is not really the way it's going to go. So when somebody says that children may not want to go to school, unfortunately, our society is such that going to school we have made it a habit. We made it a goal for children to go to school. And because we need a daycare system, because the parents have to go to work, children have to go to school. So they will be forced to go to school. The issue is whether children will get the sense of freedom and learning once they go to school. That is what we'll have to look for. What is the last point that you asked for?
It was on the new education policy about.
Yeah. So the new education policy is yet to hit the ground. There's good thoughts in it, and some thinking has started happening. And I agree that the point that Dr. Chattopadhyay made about the inequalities that already exist and how they could be exacerbated because of the various things that are going on. True, in the non-linearity of things. But that is in the beginning. Actually, the non-linearity opens up doors. I'm saying make the access free. Now imagine this. We have to, if we imagine only in the current circumstances in the school system as it exists today, then the inequalities are going to grow. But suppose if I turn it around and say that, look, a child wants to learn, doesn't have to go to the institution. So I don't have to go to IIT to get an IIT degree. Okay, the curriculum is there. I learn the Eklavya way, and I learn from somebody who's close by to me and accessible to me, and I learn and I get met. If people can go to quota to get admission into IIT, then why can't I learn at home and get IIT certification? To enter IIT, I go learn somewhere else. I can learn what is taught in IIT. That's not rocket science. This is so the learning process. And who is a teacher? Now, the teacher, the ones who are appointed in the universities could be experts, but there could be others who can teach as well. Why is that not possible? I'm asking that question. The whole learning process has to be thought through differently. So similarly, when you talk about arts and work skills and so on, it is not necessary that you get an admission. See, when I was growing up, and I don't know how many this is continuing or not, but I remember in my sixth standard, my teacher picked me for a drawing examination, and she trained a few of us and made us appear for a drawing examination, and we came up with a certificate saying this boy is good at drawing. And what was the value of it? Nothing. But I felt good, actually. And it was not conducted by the school. It was not conducted by any board. But there was somebody who did that. The same thing for Hindi. Same thing for Sanskrit. It's done for music. So if all these are there, they're examining bodies like a GRE. GRE is not conducted by a university. It's the ETS that does it. So if this kind of assessment is possible, the accountants of India can actually hold accounting exam. Why do you have to go to a commerce college for that? So I think we have to start looking at learning, assessment, and registration completely differently. So for arts, to think that somehow I'll have to go to a school, you don't have to go to a school. In the National Open School, you can learn arts. You can appear for arts examination. Somebody will teach you. Somebody who's doing Madhubani painting in a village or Warli painting in the villages of Thane, they can be certified as great artists. Why can't we do that? We are looking at everything from an institutional point of view. We talk about education being child-centric, but ultimately it comes down to institutional-centric. We try to protect institutions, and the institutions try to protect themselves. We have to open it up for the children, and that power the technology has. I'm not saying online. I'm not at all saying online. I'm saying that connects the child with any expertise, anything, anywhere. That's the point. I unfortunately will have to leave in not more than 4 minutes.
Sure. Thank you so much, sir. So for 30 seconds each, I would request each of the panelists to give one advice, one policy suggestion that you feel is most important that would set the course, our momentum towards 2047. One sentence to each of you. Dr. Saumen, we would go with you first.
Just one sentence. I think the success of NEP lies in allocating budget to the tune of 6% of GDP, school and higher education combined. Unless and until we spend that money, we are not going to empower the children, empower the school, empower the teachers and the universities to deliver. And that is very, very crucial for me.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Dr. Swati, over to you.
I think it's really mandatory to make schools or learning spaces very joyful and conducive. Where we work, there's a great divide, both educational divide and digital divide. So that needs to be bridged. And I agree with Dr. Chattopadhyay that unless education budget is not adequate, we won't be able to leverage our demographic dividend.
Thank you, ma'am. Ms. Chitra, over to you. Could you come on video, please?
Some issues Chitra ma'am has. No problem.
Okay.
Chitra ma'am.
I just have a question. Sorry. My advice would be is to really look at the teachers and the teaching community. The training of teachers and the so-called BD college, the training institute, teacher training institutes, have to be revamped to look at the current scenario and the changes that is expected for 2047.
Thank you. Ms. Huma, over to you.
Okay, one thing which I would say is, like, we need innovative ways of developing technology that may reduce the need for additional resources. One is that. Other is that we need to strengthen and build confidence in the community, if we want changes, effective changes in the learning challenges. And continuity to learning is, like, is something very important, and therefore maybe different approaches from Dr. Madhav mentioned, that catch up or blended approach or face to face or digital, everything has to be adapted, and localized, that is very important. And that is why it's important to have a back to school campaign, so that we can combat dropout immediately. And this should be done with urgency. And we need industrial support. Like, when we are talking about budget, we're always looking at the government, but it's important if we can have, institutions like the telecom industries, and, to help and support your system, so community, peer learning, accessibility, and of course, child-friendly systems are very important. But I was
Thank you,
looking
ma'am.
at what 3 things we can really, immediate things we should take. And I think that is that, within the reopening of school framework, it's important that we should start immediately with the catch-up campaign. And I really agree with Dr. Madhav on that part. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Dr. Madhav, you're concluding one sentence, and then
I
we
think
have-
everybody has said
difficult.
everything that needs to be said. No more. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Thank
Thank you.
Catch up. Let's make catch up the critical point to start off.
Very true.
It will include the
important.
training program that Chitra Jayanti wants. It will require the money support that Dr. Chattopadhyay wants, and what Swati wants also is included in it, I suppose. So let's all, with one voice, talk about catch up to get back to school. Thank you.
Catch up to get back to school. Thank you so much, Dr. Madhav Chavan. It was a pleasure, and we owe you our gratitude for spending time, and we got the best 1 hour 28 minutes. Thank you so much. Professor Saumen Chatopadhyay, Dr. Swati Jha, Ms. Huma, and Ms. Chitra, thank you for spending time with us this evening. On behalf of Center for ICT for Development at Impact and Policy Research Institute, and Team IMPRI, I thank all of you for your wonderful and enlightening remarks. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Dr. Madhav Chavan. It was a
Bye-bye.
pleasure. Thank you, sir.
Bye.
Thank you. Have a good day. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.